Hello. In this section, we are actually going to be kind of expanding on and mostly reviewing a skill that we developed last chapter. So last chapter, we learned how to graph quadratics. We did so by factoring. And so this first one is a warm-up. Just follow along and then kind of answer some questions just along the side of your notes or in your head. Uh, so the first thing is just I'd like you to kind of review how we did ones like this last chapter. So describe the first two steps in completing the following. We wanted to graph the following equation by factoring first to find the zeros, also known as the x-intercepts. So if I've done that first step of factoring for us, I've found two numbers that multiply to make -8, add up to be -2. They're -4 and +2 are our factors. Why was that helpful? What did factoring allow us to do? What was our first step after factoring? And once we had that step, what was the step after that? So pause the video now, see if you can recall and answer those two questions. After you've thought about it for a minute, unpause it, and we'll start to review it. Okay, welcome back. The reason that we factored is because I wanted to find the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts are the x values that make y be 0. If I want to know when is y 0, I set y equal to 0, and then I can solve. The two x-intercepts are going to be +4 and -2. That will make y be 0. So our first step was find the x-intercepts. Why was finding the x-intercepts helpful? Because the vertex is always halfway between the x-intercepts. So my first step was find the x-intercepts after factoring. After I found the x-intercepts, I could find the vertex. Here's what it actually looked like when we did it. So the first thing was we factored. I set y equal to be 0, and then I found my x-intercepts. My x-intercepts are at 4 and -2, shown right here. Then I found the vertex is halfway between 4 and -2. What's halfway between 4 and -2? How did we do that? You add together 4 plus -2 divided by 2. That makes 2 divided by 2, and that makes 1. So your x-coordinate of your vertex is 1. If you put 1 into your equation, you'll find that the y-coordinate is -9. So your vertex is at 1, -9, and then your y-intercept is always the point at the end, -8. You graph the left side and reflect to get the right side. We practiced those a lot in the last chapter. So that was an example of one we did last chapter. We're going to review that today. The only difference is we're going to be doing it when we have a leading coefficient, not one. So our first step of factoring is going to be a little different than just finding numbers that multiply to make the last term and add up to be the middle. The reason or our justification for this is the same justification that we used last chapter. I want to first find the x-intercepts, shown right here. The x-intercepts are always going to be the points that have a y-coordinate equal to 0. And then where is the vertex always located? The vertex is always located halfway between your x-intercepts. So halfway between. We used this picture last chapter to guide us in our work. So we're going to use it again. Here we go. We're going to try same type of problem, just when my factoring is a little bit more involved because I have a leading coefficient, not one. But the first step is still factor. I want to factor this equation because I want to know when is y going to be 0. And it's easy to answer that question when I have it factored. I know that this 2x squared is going to come from the multiplication of the first term, so this has to be 2x and an x. This last term is formed by the multiplication of the last terms, so the only way I know to get to 1 is to be +1 and +1. So this is factored. Let's check and make sure it makes 3x in the middle. 2x plus 1, x plus 1, 2x squared, 2x and 1x. That'll make 3x. 1 times 1 makes 1. So the factoring checks out. 2x squared, 3x, and 1. The reason that we factor is now I can find the x-intercepts, the zeros, or the roots. These are just 3 different names for the same thing. If I want to find the x-intercepts, I solve each equation and want to know when would x make that statement be equal to 0. Make each factor equal to 0. 2x plus 1 either equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0 because they're multiplying and making 0. I solve by subtracting 1 and then dividing by 2. So that's -0.5 or -0.5. This other one, -1. So there's my two x-intercepts. Let's do them in red. So these are going to be shown in red. -0.5, -1. My vertex has to be halfway between. You should just be able to see halfway between is -0.75. If you can't see that, you need to find the average. That's how you find halfway between. You add 2 items together and divide by 2. That's going to make -1.5 Divide by 2, I get negative 0.75. So I know my vertex, its x-coordinate is going to be along the axis of symmetry here. That axis of symmetry is when x is equal to negative 0.75. If I know an x-coordinate, how do I get the y-coordinate? Because right now all I know is that the vertex's x-coordinate is negative 0.75. I put negative 0.75 in for x in my equation. So that's where I'm going to use the calculator store feature. So I'm putting negative 0.75 in for x in my calculator. So negative 0.75, I'm going to save this for x and then hit enter. Then I just type the equation in. It was 2x squared, 3x, and 1. So 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. If you don't have the storing thing in, then you're just going to have to put parentheses and type negative 0.75 in wherever you see an x. We get that the y-coordinate is negative 0.125. If you're in like carpentry or drafting, you'll recognize that that is the fraction negative 1/8. So how did we get it? We got it by putting 0.75 negative in for x and then evaluating. That means it's just like right there, 1/8 of the way below the x-axis. And then my y-intercept is always the y value when x is 0. If I put 0 into my equation, that will go away, that will go away. It just has to be the number 1. So 0, 1 is going to be my y-intercept. I have enough points to sketch the right side, mirror image over here to make the left side, and I've got a great graph of that equation. And how did I do it? I did it by factoring. So being able to graph by factoring. Let's zoom it out here just a little bit more. 100% should be good. Perfect. So there you go. Those are all the steps. It takes some steps. Mostly it's just a process of organization. You can do all of these skills. We've done all these skills. It's just putting them together all at once. Okay, I'm going to try one more, then I'll have you try, and that will be it, because these take a little bit of time. Step 1 is to factor, because I want to find what are the x values that make y be 0. What are the roots, the zeros, x-intercepts? They all mean the same thing. When is y going to be 0? Oops, let's use black. Okay. I know that this 2x squared has to be made by the first term, so 2x and x. Now this is a negative 5, so I know one of the items has to be positive, one has to be negative. And I know in this case it's going to be minus 5 and plus 1. Let's check. You can either do multiple distribution or you can use a table to check. I'm showing the table. 2x squared, 2x. Oops, I flipped those. So yeah, that's why you check. There should be a plus 5 and a minus 1. Plus 5 minus 1. There we go. Otherwise, my sign would have been the opposite in the middle. It would have been a negative. So minus 1 minus 2x, 5x, and negative 5. Now it'll all check out. 2x squared, check. 5x plus negative 2x makes 3x, negative 5. That's why you check your work. Now it's factored. I have two items multiplying to make 0. I want to know when either one is going to be 0. So either, so it's now step 2 is to solve and find the zeros, the x-intercepts. Either 2x plus 5 equals 0 or x minus 1 equals 0. Subtract 5 and divide by 2. That's going to be, I'm going to do it all at once to save some space. It's negative 2.5. Add 1 and I get 1. So my two x-intercepts are going to be at 1 and negative 2.5. Those are also called roots, also called the zeros of the function. So 1 and negative 2.5 are my x-intercepts. The vertex is halfway in between. This one, I don't think you can just look at and see. You're going to need to solve for it. Halfway between, you add the two x-intercepts together, divide by 2. It's the average. That's negative 1.5 divided by 2. It's negative, hey, it's negative 0.75 again. Let's sketch in that axis of symmetry and make sure that that looks appropriate. Yeah, that looks like it's halfway in the middle. So my vertex is going to be somewhere along there. If I know the x-coordinate, how do I get the y-coordinate? I put negative 0.75 in for x in my equation. So I'm going to store and put in negative 0.75 in for x, but that was already in there for x, so I can use it again. My new equation, though, is 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. And when x is negative 0.75, I get negative 6.125. So my vertex is y coordinate. How did I get it? I put negative 0.75 in for x. Negative 6.125. So my vertex is going to be at negative 0.75, negative 6.125. So down here, just past negative 6. Recall that this axis is symmetry. This dashed line is not actually a part of the graph. If you wanted to, you can even delete it. It's just a guide, just to see if it was in the middle. There's my vertex. The y-intercept is always the y value when x is 0. So the y-intercept, if I put 0 in for x, it will make everything in the equation disappear except for this last term, so it has to be the negative 5. Negative 5 is my y-intercept. I can sketch the right side, and then the left side is just the mirror image of it, and I'm all done. That is how you graph by factoring. You can even use the calculator check. If you have a graphing calculator, they're called a graphing calculator because they graph. If you go up to this y equals button, clear out any equation in there, 2x squared plus 3x subtract 5. That was our equation. If you go up to this zoom button just to make sure that your window's standard, choose option 6, then it'll do a regular window, and look, that's our sketch. Or that's what it should be, and that's what our sketch looks like. So it looks like we did an excellent job. So well done. I'm going to ask you to try one. Yours to graph is 3x squared minus 8x minus 3. And this one's actually in the note packet for you. So pause the video now, factor, find the x-intercepts, find halfway between to find the vertex, plot the y-intercept, and sketch it in. Pause the video now, give it a try, unpause it once you want to see the answer. Okay, welcome back. Here we go. First thing you need to do is factor it. The factoring is 3x plus 1 and x minus 3. Now I can solve to find the zeros. The two zeros are going to be at negative 1/3 and positive 3, shown right there red and the blue. The vertex is halfway between those 2 points. Halfway between those 2 points is 1 1/3. If you put 1 1/3 in for x, or 1.33 in, you get negative 8.33 out. So your vertex is at right 1.33 and down negative 8.33. It's right there. Your y-intercept is negative 3 because that will be the y coordinate when x is 0. You sketch the left side, the right side's just a reflection, and you're all done. That is it for today. That is how you graph by factoring, even if you have a leading coefficient that is not 1. Thank you very much. Have a good one.